Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Mile High Game Guys board gaming podcast. I am your host, Adrian.
I am Zach.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is episode 70's special listisode.
Episode 70s?
Episode 70's special.
Yeah, 70
listisode.
apostrophe. You know, so
Episode
like
70s.
Yeah.
Like the 1970s?
No. Like it's episode 70. And so this is the list
It's
episode
year
that comes
70.
along with episode
Okay.
70.
Oh, it's year 70.
Year
See, now
70.
it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah.
not really.
We'll ask Andrew if the Romans were still around.
Oh, God. Yeah, so this episode, normally on our 10s, we do top 10s. This one, for a variety of reasons that we will talk about here, we are doing top 5s, but we're covering expansions. We are going to talk about what expansions we think are the best. Important note, this is not our favorite games that happen to have expansions. But yeah, so we decided to narrow it down to 5 because... Ish. Yes, because there's going to be some honorable mentions and other things included in there. One, because when we were initially talking about it, like, kind of off the cuff, it was like, man, I don't know if I could think of 10, like, my 10 favorite expansions, because I don't normally think of games in terms of expansions, especially good expansions. Like, they just become part of the game, and you always play them.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to do 5. We also figured that, especially as our tastes have kind of really solidified in their differences, just like our first top 10s, there was a lot of overlap. And then, when we revisited our top 10, there was like almost no overlap. We figured there would be very little overlap. And where these are expansions, we'll probably talk a little bit about the base game and then how the expansion changes it. And so for time reasons, it made sense, I think, to limit it to about 5 each, plus some honorable mentions and things like that.
Especially because we might have a little bit of discussion about expansions beforehand, too.
Well, and not might.
Yeah,
we will.
I know.
Anyhow, so let's talk a little bit about expansions and kind of what we look for in expansions and what we consider expansions, because like BGG considers, everything that isn't the base game but plays with the base game expansion. So like the small asteroid card from Terraforming Mars is considered an expansion for Terraforming Mars.
And clearly mandatory.
Clearly.
I guess.
It makes a big difference.
Even though it's a small asteroid.
Yeah.
Small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pun guns.
Yeah.
Fully loaded.
That joke would have had more impact if you had used the word impact.
I don't get it.
I don't know.
You guys.
Was that a pun? Is he trying?
I just thought it would have been... No, I'm not going to explain my joke.
That makes it better when you explain it.
Yep. Just like a dead frog.
Anyhow, we clearly... Well, I guess... I don't think any of us went so far as to include like a promo as one of our top 5 expansions. Like, we looked for something that does more than just adding a card or a random tile that's like...
Well, I did the 4 promo cards for Terraforming Mars and then the map for Terraforming Mars. That was my top 5. Should I change it real quick?
Oh.
Does the insert that I bought for $60 count as an expansion?
Only if your insert includes the first player marker, because then it changes the game and that you have something different to pass around the table. But no, inserts typically, are certainly not expansions.
Oh.
Yeah. I feel like he asked that sarcastically.
Well, no shit. You guys are in fine form already.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think any of us, I know I certainly didn't specifically exclude expand-alones, but they don't really fit on my list unless it's an expand-alone that I don't ever do alone. Like, it just became part of that base game. Like, all of mine kind of revolve around the idea that there's a base game that I really like, and then there's now this expansion that I also really like. Not necessarily tied to how much I like the base game, although that plays some part, obviously. I don't know. Do you guys have any input on kind of how how you differentiate between expansions and things, and like what you look for in expansions. Maybe I don't know if you want to take it in a slightly different direction.
Well, first I was going to say regarding expandalones that I didn't really include any of those on mine. It's not. I didn't specifically be like, oh, this can be played on its own. I'm not going to count. I didn't try and do that, but they never really came up. I might have one that's a honorable mention, but
okay.
Otherwise, yeah. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, it was just pretty much straight expansion. I mean, one of mine is kind of weird, but two of mine might be also weird, so that's fine.
It wouldn't be us if it wasn't at least a little weird.
Yeah. Mine. Yeah, you'll see.
Yeah. No. Oh, I'll see. And you guys will hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, in general, if you're looking to, like, what kind of influences you to first go from, like, I enjoy this base game, there's an expansion. Like, what makes you interested in the expansion? Like, are you just immediately, oh, I like the base game, I'm interested in any expansion? Or is it like you have to find out, like, there has to be something about the expansion that gets you interested in the first place? And then beyond that, what makes you take the next step into, like, oh, yeah, I'm getting this expansion? And then which one, like, is there anything about them that make you like them?
So I have a very precise way of figuring out if I want the expansion or not. Do I have that game? I do. All right, I'll buy that expansion then.
All right, so Zach is fully in the completionist category.
Yes. No, it's not even do I have that game and have played it. It's do I have that game? I do. Okay, I'll buy that expansion then.
All right. Jeff, do you have more discerning taste?
Yes.
AKA taste.
Yeah. Does your taste exist? Yes or no? My taste usually depends on the game a lot. Like Dominion. I like Dominion. Do I need every Dominion expansion? No.
Yes.
There's a fuckload.
Yeah.
There's an incredible amount of them. And at some point it becomes too unwieldy for you to be able to even move around or play or anything like that because of how many fucking crazy amount of cards there are. So that can kind of like hit a certain level. Of course, I also own every Arkham Horror expansion, and that is incredibly huge amount of stuff. But that would be a game that I would buy all of it because I love the game. Sometimes if it's an expansion that just adds a little bit of utility to the game, like makes it a little easier, makes some components a little better, that would be nice. But otherwise, I usually do a pretty decent amount of research on expansions just to see, like, is it worth it or not? Sometimes it is, sometimes not. But a lot of the games that I have that require expansions are things like Descent or Imperial Assault, where it's just sort of like, holy shit, there's a billion expansions for this.
It's more of like an addition version, a continuation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But something like War of the Ring, like, I really want all those expansions.
Yeah.
Just because they add like an incredible amount of stuff into it, even though they're out of print.
Right.
Yeah. I'm definitely more on Jeff's side of the table on this one. I have never once been able to straight afford, like, oh, this has things, I'm going to buy all of the things for it. I mean, I own Imperial Assault. Like, I cannot afford to buy everything that exists for Imperial Assault. Megan, her favorite game is Catan. Well, I don't know if it still is, but for a long time, her favorite game was Catan. And her dad latched onto that when he thought of gifts to get her for, like, birthdays and Christmas. So we have in our house every Catan base game expansion and the 5 to 6 player expansions for every one of those base games. Half of them are still in shrink.
I've seen them. There's a lot.
Because we wouldn't, they're not necessarily ones we normally would buy. We both really like Catan. And, there are some expansions that we definitely would have went out and bought, but not all of them, because, there is a certain level of, like, does this game feel like, I don't want to say complete, because I want to strongly differentiate between, like, a game that is good and that I like on its own, and so I'm looking to add more to that game, like, maybe deepen it a little bit more or broaden it a little bit more.
But
versus,
at some point,
like,
you're just adding time to the game.
Yeah. Versus a game that's like, this game kind of sucks, but I've heard this expansion makes it not suck. I want to really differentiate between that, because that's a key part of me looking for buying an expansion. Like if a game sucks, I'm very unlikely to go spend more money on that game, even if it might make it suck less. Versus a game that's like, holy shit, I like this game, I play it a lot. Let's see how I can add even more value or replayability or experience or what have you to the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I definitely kind of evaluate all of them to some extent, you know, on that scale. I mean, like I mentioned Imperial Assault. I definitely, when we go to Gen Con, if there's Imperial Assault stuff in the Ding and Dent and I have extra money, I definitely buy every Imperial Assault Ding and Dent that I can. Like, I'm slowly trying to acquire it all. They just keep putting it out too fast.
Right.
Race for the Galaxy is another one. It's got a shit ton of different arcs. You know, and I'll touch on it a little bit more later specifically. But there's other issues that keep me from wanting to buy everything that Race for the Galaxy has.
Yeah. What do you guys feel about expansions that include additional players?
So if that's all it changes, if it's like, oh, hey, this is the stuff so that you can turn this 4-player game into a 5 to 6-player game, cough, cough, Catan, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. That's certainly not something that I would ever consider like a favorite expansion. Like those aren't going to be anywhere near this list. Just because like changing player counts doesn't typically change the fundamental game. I mean, some games it does. It drastically affects how many, you know.
Sometimes it makes the game way worse.
Yeah, because I'd say a lot of times it just makes the game longer.
Yeah,
because it's more people, obviously. But I'm trying to think of one where it added more players, and I was like, sweet.
Scythe.
No. Not for me. God, no.
I haven't played with those expansions. So.
Don't play with all of them.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't play some player regardless, yeah.
You know, for me, like, Catan kind of comes close to that, especially because they do tweak the base rules to accommodate the extra players, so it doesn't add a whole lot of time, because it adds that, like, extra buy phase.
Trade phase?
Trade phase, yeah. You know, which then, in theory, opens up the amount of trading, because now you're trading with 2 people instead of 1, so it does kind of add an interesting twist to the gameplay, but that's kind of close to the limit on that. Doesn't Blood Rage, didn't one of the included in the Kickstarter expansions add
that added
extra
a 5th player? Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember. I feel like it makes it take a little bit too long there.
I'm pretty sure Eclipse, one of the expansions, takes it from like 1 to 7 to 1 to 9. But I've never wanted to play Eclipse at anything more than like 3 or 4 in the first place.
Yeah.
So playing like a 7 to 9 play, like, no.
I think that also had rules where it's like 2 people are going at the same time to help reduce with that or something like that. But yeah.
I mean, the only reason I would ever want to do that is like, what's the largest a single game can cover a table?
Okay. I remembered one. So.
Yeah.
Later.
Okay.
Later.
Right on. So, I mean, ultimately, like, I'd say we have all of us relative, like, I guess, rather than speaking for you guys, let me pose this as a question.
Okay.
Do you guys have any problems or concerns with expansions? You know, like, video games went from this place where, like, you know, oh, there's, like, expansions that add more to the game to where now, like, you've getting
day one
DLCs and weird things like that, where it's like, oh, they released a broken game and then immediately patched it with a DLC that's mandatory, you know, for the game to be usable.
Right.
Like, cough, Destiny, cough. Do you have any concerns about board gaming going in that direction? Do you have any negative opinions of expansions in general for board gaming specifically? Anything like that?
There are thankfully some small examples of where it's like, oh, I bought this new game and it's like this big box, and then all it comes in the box is like the one little tiny set of cards in there, but also like 20 little areas to put cards that these clearly don't fit into. That's like, oh, this is definitely a box that's made to have a bunch of expansions coming out for it in the future.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing if it's a known CCG, like, you know, if you bought Netrunner and the Netrunner core box had like an insert that had a bunch of slots for different decks, to where it's like, oh, well, clearly they plan on
an insert. Oh, man. That's funny.
I know, it's a Fantasy Flight game, so there's a trough.
Yeah. Trench. Get it right, man.
No, it's a trough because it's full of slop. but something like that, then that's certainly one thing. A game like Smash Up is in the similar vein. Like everybody knew when Smash Up came out that they were going to continue releasing expansions and decks, and so
and it had enough to play 4 players with different combinations and stuff. So
there was enough in the base game that it wasn't like, oh, you're just setting me up to continue to buy all of your shit.
Yep. Unlike the LCG things where it's like they literally like, if you want to actually be able to make competitive decks, you have to buy more than one of these.
Or like Arkham LCG, where it's like, hey, you can play 2 players with this. It technically can play 4 though, but you're gonna need more core sets.
Yeah. Well, you need 2 core sets per player to get the actual decks you want. And then,
So
then like 8 core sets. Then you can play 4 player.
There you go.
But I almost for the like, again, not something that I specifically set out to do in my list, but I do think there is a difference between things like CCGs and LCGs, where that's a very specific like business model they're going for, versus like even something like Imperial Assault, where constant editions are still part of the planned cycle, but it still feels slightly different. Like there's a full game in just the Imperial Assault box without any additions.
Yeah.
Whereas there might not be like a super full game of Netrunner in the Netrunner core set.
Full enough.
I mean, maybe.
Then there's also those games that are like, here's a trillion expansions, like Carcassonne and Catan, and Dominion, and now there's Dominion
Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
Kind of. Ticket to Rides are more expand alone. Well, they're just standalone, separate versions.
Yeah.
But
they do end up selling maps for it too, I think.
Yeah.
So
which those, it seems like, I mean, if you look at that list, like Catan, Dominion, Carcassonne, like those are 3 of like the games that are like incredibly well-known, established, popular. So it makes sense. Like there's a lot of people who never go farther than those games. So it makes sense for a publisher standpoint, especially, to be like, I'm just going to keep making stuff for this game that like some people who never move beyond it know, so that you end up with somebody where their entire game shelf is just all Carcassonne and nothing else.
Yeah.
But that's I think a little bit
none
different.
Of those
comes with just popularity.
Yeah. But none of those even touch any of my like favorite expansions. Not even close.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So without much further ado, I think we've kind of talked enough about what we think about expansions in general, what we look for. Let's start. I know we all kind of have some honorable mentions or things we want to get out of the way before we hit our lists. Zach, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I have a few honorable mentions. First one is Pandemic on the Brink. And that one was just because I felt like that was my first real game expansion that I had really gotten into the hobby with.
Okay.
And so it always has, a little place in my heart. And also it felt like it turned the base game of Pandemic into, it's like, oh wow, it has all these extra things now. It can make it a lot harder. And it added more, but it also added new things. So and that it felt that it put the entire base game and it's itself in its own box. So I like that.
On the Brink adds the counter-terrorist, right?
Yeah, Bioterrorist, yes.
Bioterrorist.
Yes.
Never actually played.
It is okay. I like the virulent strains more. That's how I lost Pandemic in 2 turns. And not 2 rounds, as in like I went, someone else went, we lost.
Good God.
Yeah, it was messed up. My next one is for Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition, Shattered Empire. So that one added 2 extra players to Twilight Imperium, bringing it from 6 players to 8 players.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't realize that base only went to 6.
Yes. But then it also added my favorite race, the Winnu.
All right, I'm going to jump on real quickly here. And this should probably be the only time I do this for honorable mentions.
Yeah.
I also have Twilight Imperium 3 expansions, just in general. Like I just wrote expansions.
Yeah.
As one of my honorable mentions, and that's because I've quite literally never played Twilight Imperium without both of the 2 main expansions, and so I just have no frame of reference.
Right, you don't know which one is which.
Yeah, so, and it's all it's Bob's copy where they're all put into one box. I barely even know. Like I know what's expansion stuff versus what's base stuff, but I don't know what is which expansion. And I just mentioned, I didn't know that one of them took it from 6 to 8. I thought it was always 8.
Yeah, and then it fixed the 8 card, or it added a new 8 card, so it wasn't always the take these points. Take this point. Second to last one is Eclipse, the ship pack 1, which, I mean, technically, I the reason this was an honorable mention is just I like that they gave you unique ships. That's pretty much all it does, right?
Yes.
So-
I think it adds a couple other small things. My problem with that one, and why it's not going to be on my list, even though I do actually really like the game, is it doesn't give you enough ships to cover all the races.
No.
Especially if you have like the later expansions that add more players, or the other expansion that adds.
I mean, so I think that's the reason they called it Ship Pack 1.
And then there was never a ship pack 2.
Because then they're like, oh, we'll do our second edition and then just include that in there already.
Yeah. So that one's pretty far from my list.
Yep. And then my last one is the sort of expand alone that I was talking about. But it's also weird because it came out before the first game, the game that I'm talking about.
I know what this is.
Yeah. The game is Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. The expand alone is Mansions of Madness 1st edition because it expands into 2nd edition. And it also has this mode where you can play against somebody else versus fully co-op. So it added something new.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that one that one doesn't actually count. I just made that one up. Well, I didn't just make that up, but
you made it up earlier.
Yes.
It exists.
Yes.
It's not made up.
No.
So for me, my honorable mentions, previously, like I said, I jumped on your Twilight Imperium 3. Just, I have no frame of reference for whether they're good or not. Tying back in, I guess, a little bit to the email section of last episode, Roads and Boats, etc. I have heard nothing but fantastic things and that it's almost a mandatory expansion. I just haven't had a chance to play it yet. Paul's had it for a while. It adds a whole bunch of pieces and is supposed to be really good. I expect it to immediately earn a place on this list. Similar to the expand-alone issue, Age of Steam and 18XX, each game is their own thing, but they kind of change and they all build off a base system, so they're in a weird realm. Unfortunately, I've only ever played one 18XX and I've only ever played one Age of Steam map, so I don't feel comfortable talking about either of those more in depth as expansions. And then games like Time Stories, like each expansion adds a new module, but like there again, it doesn't feel like what I think of as an expansion. It's like this is just the next step for the game.
I think for me it's like these are continuations. It's the next part of the story. And so that's why I didn't include any of those.
Yeah, but I did want to mention those because that is kind of like a similar idea that you're buying these extra boxes and so that's it for me. Jeff?
I think you touched on a lot of mine. One that is probably my best honorable mention, the Lords of Waterdeep expansions. Fantastic.
Have you actually played with them?
Yes.
Because I have Scoundrels of Skullport.
Mm-hmm.
I have opened it. I believe I've punched it. I have never played with it. But I've heard it should, it could go right there alongside Ancetera, where from what I've heard, once you play it, you'll never go back to playing without it.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that kills me for that one is there's no way to put it in the base box without throwing away those inserts.
Yeah.
And so that keeps me from ever wanting to ever play with it. I need to just buy the broken token that puts them both in one box.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Probably the one that no one has mentioned is Agricola, the Goodies expansion. So this one adds realistic resources to the base game. So it's not just the little round pieces. They'll actually look like the little shaped meeples.
I think the new editions just have that.
They do.
Okay.
When I was playing, it didn't.
Yes. Okay.
So it also added a bunch of crazy decks into the game. It added the X deck, which is like an alien abduction deck. And a ton of 5 double-sided theme boards. So there was like a Western, Spring, Autumn, Winter, and Mars themed boards that you can play on. And I really bought it just for the actual like shaped meeples, but then it came with like all of these crazy different decks for new occupations and minor improvements that were all crazy and wacky.
Yeah. Although Agricola is one of my favorite games of all time, I still have not played the base game enough to where I quite feel like I need all those crazy weird expansion decks.
No,
but I want them, but a lot of them are really hard to find and very expensive now.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate.
And it also came with stickers that you could put on your different colors as well. So you don't need to buy minis. You can just put stickers on them.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, good luck finding that though. It's like $125 now, like resale.
Sounds about right.
Yep.
So almost expensive as the minis.
Yeah. Jeez.
Right on. Well, now that we've kind of covered our honorable mentions, let's dive into some lists. I'll go ahead and start with number 5 on my list. This is also one of the only ones that's very generic-ish. Zombicide. And it's also the only one that even remotely is expandalones.
So everything after the base game, first base game, right? Everything after that.
Well, not everything.
Okay.
Because not like some of the small packs of things, and not even like so Zombicide has basically their seasons, and each season has like an expansion that is legitimately just an expansion.
Yeah.
Really the two I want to point out are Toxic City and Prison Outbreak, which added the toxic zombies and the berserker zombies, I think they are. Like, basically one of them, if you melee kill them, they explode acid everywhere and hurt you. And then the other ones cannot be hurt by ranged, so you can only melee kill them. I just think that playing the game, like having those different types of zombies mixed in and everything, just makes for a little bit better experience. I also did kind of jot down Black Plague, although I don't like the change of scenery as much. Like, it kind of broke the, I don't know, zombie thematic immersion for me or whatever. Like, I prefer zombies in modern day with guns and modern things versus like, oh, it's medieval zombies. Like, that.
Well, in medieval fantasy, because they're spells.
Yeah. It sounded interesting at first, but like playing it a couple times, it was just like, nah, all of the zombie fiction that I've ever grown up with is all like the modern world, and then zombies show up and wreck the day. Like, and so like all of my basis in enjoying zombies comes from that. So the thing I do like about Black Plague and why I jotted it down is it does fix a lot of things with rules that just make the game play better. So like carry some of those over into regular Zombicide, throw in some Toxics and throw in some Berserkers, and you're good to go. Things beyond that, like the crows and the dogs, those little small, tiny boxes, they're fine if you want to spend the extra money, but they're not part of this like Zombicide expansions. It's specifically the toxic zombies and the berserker zombies being added into that to give you 3 different kinds that present different challenges.
How much of the base game did you play?
A fair amount.
Okay.
And the base game is just fine by itself. It does not need them.
I don't think it needs the extra zombies and stuff like that, but I think that game needed the like ultra red weapons and stuff that weren't in the base game.
Yeah.
That made me love that game so much more.
Especially because it really just ratchets the entire like absurdity of
the zombie murdering.
Zombicide is the zombie game when you want to be the zombie killing badass just mowing down hordes of zombies.
In the base game, I don't feel you felt that as much as you did once those expansions came out with those ultra red weapons.
Yeah. So
that's where it really came together.
So that's my number 5. It's also, I mean, if we're being real, like in my personal collection, Zombicide definitely has the most expansions of any game, and that includes Catan, where we have every one of them. I had to put Zombicide in a huge tub to fit all of it in one somewhat condensed space, and that's the only game I've ever had to do that for. So there you go.
It's all just loose pieces.
Jeff, you're number 5.
My number 5, it's a smaller expansion, but it's one that I loved. It's Ticket to Ride USA 1910. So it turns the standard US version of Ticket to Ride with the teeny tiny cards into full-size actual cards, along with adding more cities and tickets, as well as like an out-of-print expansion, the like big cities expansion. It adds a little bit more challenging, like actual ride things, routes, and then it has the additional like Trans-American like bonus victory card at the end. I love it just because I hate the little teeny tiny cards in any game, and I was like, yes, I can have adult size cards, please, which was definitely beneficial. And also it has similar tickets on there, and the art on the 1910 ones just is like way better. Because on the old little tiny ones, it's like, here's where this city is. Here's where this city is. I don't know. Draw a line in between them, and it actually does that on the
Gotcha.
on the the bigger size tickets.
Gotcha.
Right on.
So
Yeah,
it's a mini expansion.
Yeah, I had thought about that one because I think for me at least that definitely feels like one that's like sort of like we fixed one of the problems with the game. Here you go.
I don't think I've ever played it.
Yeah, I mean it's just
Yeah, I mean, I was looking over your shoulder there a little bit as you were looking at the cards. I liked one of the routes looked like way more complex, which is kind of cool. I could definitely see although I don't hate always mini cards, I could see in Ticket to Ride it being nice to have full size ticket cards.
I agree with that too.
It's also really much easier to shuffle full size cards than small cards.
That's one of the reasons I got the 10th anniversary of Ticket to Ride was because it came with that expansion for free.
Oh.
amongst a bunch of other shit.
Amongst it also being colossal.
Yes.
Yeah. Was it double 50% the size?
50% the size. Yeah.
Right on. Zach, what's your number 5?
So my number 5 is sort of a small one too. Coup Reformation. So it comes with a new role, the Inquisitor, which is interesting enough, but I don't half the time I don't even play with that one. For me, it was all about the fact that it added teams. You had the Loyalists and then the Rebels, or I forget what other name is.
Pretty sure.
And the fact that you can't attack someone on your own team, but you can change your team or you can change somebody else's team, brought a lot of interesting decisions to the game.
Yeah.
I thought. Especially if you're like, oh, I see that Jeff has to queue on his next turn. I'm going to turn Jeff onto my team so I make sure that he can't queue me. But then I also like the option that if everybody gets on the same team, then it's a free-for-all. Yeah. So you're just like, oh yeah, now Jeff can only attack Adrian, and Adrian's like, well, I'm just going to turn myself to my own team then.
And it's only 1 credit for you to change yours and 2 to change someone else's.
Exactly. And then also it added the reserve where the money you spend to change teams goes into there, and then you have to claim to not be the Duke in order to get that money. And so I felt that was a good way to, because it always sucked in the base game when everybody else had, say you're playing 4 players and all 3 of the other people have Dukes, and you're like, fuck, I'm pretty sure they actually do have Dukes, and you're just like, well, I'm just getting 1 money a turn. They're getting 3. There's really nothing much I can do about it.
Yeah.
So I like that they added an additional way for other people to get money.
Yeah. It doesn't super fix that, especially because that's a big problem early in the game.
Yeah.
And early in the game, there's no money in the reserve. But I do otherwise agree. The last time I played Coup, we played with the Reformation and the teams.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten how much that does add that extra little degree of messing around with people. Oh shit, we're all on the same team, and after me, you're gonna coup, so I'm gonna turn this other person into the other team, so they are the only person you can coup, and they're screwed. Which then gets into an interesting thing, because then that person's like, well, shit, Jeff cooed me, but Adrian forced me to be the only one he could coup, so who do I target?
Exactly.
And it just splits things and makes it all...
and then it also adds the ability to go up to 8 or 10 players? 10. Okay. So I think
you can have 5 copies of each card.
And I know for me at least, there's a big, if 7 people are claiming to be the Duke and there's 5 of them, I feel a lot less likely to call them out than 5 people claiming to be the Duke and only 3 of them are one.
Right. The other thing I really like about that, and I don't know if just the Reformation expansion has it or if it was part of the Kickstarter.
Right.
The unique art.
That was part of the Kickstarter.
Okay, so that's not part of the expansion. Darn. Because I do really like that, because it adds another level of strategy when you're moving through the drawing cards. You're like, oh, well, I know I put an Inquisitor in there earlier, and then I drew this clearly different Inquisitor, so there's at least 2 accounted for. It adds a different strategy.
Yes, no, I'd agree with that.
Okay, well, but if that's not part of the expansion, doesn't matter. Number 4. So ranking these in an order for me was tricky.
Yeah.
Mostly so Zombicide was clearly 5 for me, especially because Zombicide is, of the games here, one of the ones I enjoy the least anymore.
Right.
I used to love it. I just don't hardly ever play it anymore, which is why I put this one here at number 4, because it's in a similar vein. It's a game that has a really fond spot in my heart, but I don't hardly ever play it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the last one where I'm going to mention multiple expansions in the same entry, and that's Settlers of Catan with Seafarers and Cities of Knights. Catan, like we mentioned at the beginning, is one of those games where there are just so many expansions for it. And I think this is a great game for clearly delineating the difference for me between an expansion, what makes a good expansion and what makes a meh expansion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say bad because I haven't played any of the other ones that aren't quote unquote good. So Seafarers, what it does really well is it is an excellent example of just giving you more of what you like about the base game. Seafarers doesn't really change hardly anything about base Catan other than introducing ocean tiles and ships to cross ocean tiles. And ocean tiles are just another tile you you put in there to change the layout of the board a little bit. They don't really drastically alter gameplay. And all ships really do is they're easy to make and they serve a path. They give a previously underpowered good, sheep, a little bit more weight so that it brings them up to par with some of those other goods. So now all the goods kind of reside on a more equal level. Other than that, the gameplay's pretty much the exact same. You're building paths and cities at the end of those paths and trying to get victory points, and whoever gets the most victory points wins.
Or gets to 10 victory points.
Well, gets to 10, yeah, sorry. Cities and Knights is a great example of how to add a new twist to a good game that still feels like it fits. None of the gameplay really changes. Again, it just adds, a little bit of depth to the cities, and makes, especially for a game like Catan that's older, and as more and more games came out and like game design changed and evolved, it started to feel a little stale. It was just tossing some dice and hoping for the best.
Right.
This adds a little bit of different mechanics to that where you can kind of in some ways get ahead of that dice mitigation. Like one of the things you can ultimately build up in Cities and Knights allows you, if you don't produce on a roll, you get a good. So like you don't get screwed when the rolls just totally go against you. Things like that. But it still, again, is another one that feels like Catan, just a little bit deeper. So Seafarers makes Catan broader. Cities and Knights makes it a little deeper. Neither one really depart drastically from what Settlers of Catan is, and that's why they're both on here for my number 4.
I've only played with the Cities and Knights one. I feel like I enjoyed it, but I feel like I played it once or twice with that, and then every other time since it's just been base Catan.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, at least at the game nights, it always felt like people were just like, well, let's just play base. That's getting a little bit too complicated. / they didn't bring,
Yeah.
they didn't have it with them.
That is an issue with Cities and Knights is, like I said, it makes it deeper, so it does add more game to the game. So it's not quite as easy to just be like, oh, you don't really know games? Here, teach this. Or if it's somebody who's only ever played Catan and hasn't experienced other game mechanics, then for them it might be like, whoa, this all of a sudden I have to keep track of all these other things. That's not fun. So it fits a niche.
I've only ever played base Catan.
Hefe, your number 4?
My number 4 is Machikoro Harbor. Base Machikoro.
Tunu Boat Mafia? What?
Tuna Boat. Base Machikoro, I had played, I think someone had brought it I think I had only played it with the Harbor and maybe the Millennium Row. Before, and then someone brought base Machikoro, and I was like, oh yeah, I love Machikoro. And then I played base Machikoro, and I was like, I don't love base Machikoro.
Yeah.
The Harbor expansion adds a 5th player and a ton more buildings that you can build that are way more interesting. It does lengthen the game a bit, but everything that gets lengthened in there is actually like valuable.
Right.
You get some cool new like buildings in the actual base game. And the only reason that Millionaire's Row
Yeah.
Is not on this list is because I think it takes it a step too far and makes it a little too long at the end game, where I think the Harbor expansion really kind of hits the peak Koro of Machi.
I love it. I would definitely agree with that. So I know the Harbor expansion just added one card to the set you had to build, but it was the Harbor. And so I like that it had this card that once you built it, then you're able to get access to like the tuna boat or the other boat. Tuna boat's always my favorite because then every time a bunch of people get tuna boats, they're always like, let's get more tuna boats, more tuna boats.
More tuna boats.
And
Merp, merp.
yeah, but I definitely would agree. I think the Millionaire's Row makes the game longer because I feel like it feels like it has too many negative cards in there.
Too many of the red cards.
Yeah, too many red cards that keep taking people's money away, so they can't progress enough.
Yeah.
So I feel like it does make it take too long. So I think the Harbor one definitely hits the right pitch for it.
Yeah, and then and Harbor added some good red cards in there, like the sushi bar and some of the classics.
Yeah, me and Machikaro had to be the fastest. I went from like, holy shit, I love this game, let me buy everything, to I'd be all right if I don't ever play this game again. I agree that Harbor's a really good expansion for it. I think that the Tuna Boat Mafia can frequently be too overpowered, which is where and this is an example of like, so the base game was like not so great.
Yeah.
Like it worked fine for a couple plays.
It was super
but
light.
Yeah, and it got stale quick. So they're like, all right, well, let's put out this expansion. And they put out an expansion, and then people were like, holy shit, and they played it a whole bunch, and they went, this thing's kind of broken. And they went, well, let's try and fix it. So they tried to fix it, and it swung it too far the other way. Yeah. Like, I need there to be maybe a fan-made, way to mix the two expansions, or maybe a new, Machi Koro Essential Edition that's like a condensed...
It's the cities.
It's not the Target version.
No. There's a non-Target version of that one too. The Cities and Lights or something like that. This one also added the
City Hall.
Yeah, well,
as well.
Yes.
Yes, and
it added the different way to set up too.
Yeah,
because the first one you had all the cards out, and then it was just whoever gets the most money to buy. It was just whoever got luckiest on rolls. Then basically.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, it had
it's 6 spots.
Yes.
Draft kind of.
Yeah.
You just keep putting cards out in stacks until you have 6 different ones. And then you go.
Yep. And so I liked that it reduced the amount of choices that you had to make in any given turn for which ones you wanted to buy. I know some people don't like that.
I
like the trench style of deck building versus the Dominion style where everything's
just have everything open.
Yeah.
Or your Arctic scavenger style of deck building.
Still have not played that one, so that's why I don't use that reference.
Yeah.
You don't understand that reference?
No, I understand it. I just don't use it because I've never played it.
So yeah, Machikoro, Harbor.
Yep. Zach, your number 4.
My number 4 is for King of Tokyo, the power-up expansion. And this one, basically, the main reason I like this one is, and this was sort of early on in my game playing experience, was that it introduced individual powers to each player, or to each character they use, and those are all unique. So, and it also added one more character too, the panda. But it was like King Kong, or the king, had a bunch of things that were specific to him, whereas Cyber Bunny had a lot of things that were specific to him. And then it just added it added before, every character was just do I want to be the king or the Cyber Bunny? It's just whatever one I want to be.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But now it's just you're doing these, and now he has his own specific I wouldn't say strength and weaknesses, but his cards deal with doing certain things. His is more about getting in Tokyo and blah blah blah, whereas Cyber Bunny is more for doing these sort of things. And it just added new ways to play the game, specifically through which characters are in the game. So I really like that it added those.
Right on.
Yeah,
I've never played with the power up thing.
It works out well. I had seen that they were doing, when they were doing the second edition, of King of Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, that's cool. I mean, they updated the art and stuff like that, but I'm like, is the power up in there? And it's like, no, it's not in there. So it's like, okay, well, it sucks that they're gonna have, because they did release the power up expansion
for second edition.
for the second edition, but I was like, oh, I feel like that should have been a thing, because I know a lot of things, or a lot of games do it when they have their second edition. They're like, we're gonna sort of combine a lot of the stuff from previous expansions into this one, so you just need this.
Yeah,
Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, it incentivizes you to be like, all right, well, I guess I'll upgrade to this
Yes.
new edition, versus like, oh, well, I don't need to have 2 copies of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, right on. My number 3, and this is one where I ran into kind of an interesting situation. I'm just gonna. So, number 3 for me is Race for the Galaxy Gathering Storm, which is the first expansion for Race for the Galaxy. When I first got it, I loved it, especially because it added Solitaire, which I actually enjoy. Race for the Galaxy Solitaire. It's one of the few games I'll play Solitaire somewhat regularly. Part of that is also because Race for the Galaxy is incredibly portable, and I feel like most of the time I play Solitaires when I'm traveling and by myself. Like, I don't play Solitaire at home because I've got a Xbox and a PC and a TV and other things to do. But sometimes when I'm traveling, I don't have those things. It also adds some starting worlds and just some additional planets that kind of open up some other strategies that were a little bit more narrow in the base game of Race for the Galaxy. But it's not one that, like, it doesn't change anything so fundamentally about the game that there's not a lot to talk about. It's not like, oh, I love Gathering Storm because of this or that or the other. It's more of the same, and added a Solitaire variant that I don't play as much anymore, but I used to, and I really like that. However, it's one that it so well integrates with the game that I forget it's in there. Like, it's just part of the game now. Like, it doesn't add so many cards that the deck's unwieldy. It doesn't change anything so drastically that, like, things stop working or that you have to balance it, or, like, there's no new rules to teach somebody. You just teach them Race for the Galaxy, and they don't even notice the Gathering Storm's in there. I do also want to take this point to mention, as I said I'd come back to Race for the Galaxy. I have a couple other expansions for it. However, I'll probably never add them. Like, one of the ones I ended up with somehow, like the Ancient Orb, I think is what it's called.
The Alien Artifacts one?
But it specifically says, only play this with the base game. Ignore the other expansions. And like I said, this one fits so seamlessly. Like, I don't want to take it out, but I don't want to just start cramming a bunch of expansions together to where this becomes some unwieldy, huge deck that you can't effectively anticipate what card. Like, because that's a huge part of the game, is knowing that these cards are in that deck somewhere. And yeah, you might not see them because your opponent might get them and trash them and things like that. But if you add too many cards, then it just becomes a crapshoot as to what you'll ever get, and it ruins all the strategy of the game. So I don't think I'll ever, like, I don't have the second expansion that comes after Gathering Storm. I'm missing that one.
All Out War?
The Rebel one.
Rival Factions, I think. But I have the third one, but you need the second one, and so it's just sitting there in its expansion, and then I have the Artifacts one that I'll never add, like, ever.
And then they do another one after that is still
that's yet
itself.
another standalone. So, like, I really like Race
that.
for the Galaxy, but I don't like it enough to, like, I feel like the best way to do it would be to buy 3 base sets, and then have one base set with the first expansion arc, one with the second expansion arc, and one with the third expansion arc, and then pick and choose. But as much as I like Race for the Galaxy, like, Race for the Galaxy plus Gathering Storm is all the race I need.
Yeah.
So.
And you didn't even mention the objectives, which are my favorite part.
I still have not played with the objectives.
It's just first did this, and then you get like an extra 5 victory points or an extra 3 victory points, whether it's a major or minor objective.
Yeah. I would like to play sometime with them, but I haven't.
It's Xeno Invasion was that new one
That's the
That's what it was,
newest,
yep.
Newest
third
one.
arc. What's the expansion number 2 that came after Gathering Storm?
As
since you
Rebel
have them all
versus
here?
Imperium,
That's
and
what it
then
was.
then the Brink of War.
Mhm.
I think those first 3 expansions are all,
One arc.
They are.
Yeah, they all fit together.
but they're all well worth getting.
Yeah.
I think I played the vast majority of mine with all 3.
Okay.
Didn't the third one introduce a like a way to take over other people's planets or
I think
something
so,
like that?
yeah.
And we never even used it.
Yeah, and that's the
It
the
was
other...
super.
That's what I always find funny about a lot of Race of the Galaxy expansions. For the most part, it always seemed to be like they added something else. I don't give a shit about that. I just wanted more cards.
Yeah.
So I got more cards.
It was something like
Well,
Conquest.
and
or,
that's something that's kind of nice about them, and something I appreciate when games do with expansions, where like one expansion adds 2 or 3 things that you can add either individually or all of them,
Right.
depending on how much you want to change up your
Mhm.
experience. So,
Yep.
Jeff, your number 3.
My number 3 is the expansion to end all expansions. It is
Only at number 3, huh?
Yep. It is Arkham Horror Miskatonic Horror expansion.
Oh, yeah.
So I love Arkham Horror and had bought all the expansions. And then I think one of the last expansions that they released was Miskatonic Horror, which is an expansion that expands all of the Arkham Horror expansions. It comes with 450 new cards.
That's a lot of cards.
Yes. New skills, gates, mythos cards for the base game, additional exhibits for the Dark of Pharaoh, Injury Madness, Dunwich Location Horror cards for the Dunwich Horror, more Blight and Act cards for the King in Yellow, Kingsport locations for Kingsport, Cult Encounters for the Black and the Goat Woods. Like literally every expansion got expanded on with their own unique mechanics.
Was Exhibit involved in the production of this expansion?
I can only hope. So yeah, I played a fuckload of this game, and it made it really hard to thin down the game to be somewhat reasonable to play, because the Mythos deck would get about, 8 to 9 inches tall if you had all of the expansion's Mythos cards in there.
Right.
So you sort of had to customize your own decks.
Yeah, my Zombicide decks I had to customize for the same reason. Like, they just get too ridiculous.
And that's definitely what this game hit. I need to go back through it all once it ever makes it to Denver and kind of separate out everything and see, with especially after Miskatonic got added to everything, because like even everyone's like Mythos decks got bigger,
Right.
like with just the Miskatonic stuff. It was the first one I think that had a trench in it from Fantasy Flight.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite the expansion. And that was my best way to throw in literally every expansion to Arkham Horror, because I love Arkham Horror and all of its expansions. So why not be my favorite Arkham Horror expansion, the expansion that expands all the expansions?
Good choice.
Yep.
Expansion.
Yep.
Zach, what is your number 3?
So my number 3 is the Valhalla expansion for Champions of Midgard / sort of Scoundrels of Skullport for Lords of Waterdeep too. Just in the sense that especially with Champions, there was something there that I always felt was a bit, I wouldn't say off, because when you're fighting monsters in the base game and like say you get a bad roll and all your guys die, that's it. You're shit out of luck. And I knew that, like, Adrian, if that happened to you once and you lost 5 guys you put on there and you just you'd be like, fuck this game forever.
Probably.
Yeah. So the Valhalla expansion added, basically it added Valhalla, and so now you basically, whenever your guys die, you get these little tokens. And it's like now you get to use those to actually get other better things. So now sometimes you're like, I'm actually okay that he died, and so it sort of mitigated some of that bad luck that some people absolutely hate. But it also added in an interesting new mechanic in the into getting those better dice, because it added new dice too. It added those Berserkers and the
Like Shield Maidens.
Yeah. And that was how you got those. And then it also had like super epic monsters that you had to get a lot of dead souls to be able to purchase for a lot of points and stuff like that.
And the more dice you have you get little chits that you can purchase super powerful items.
Yes, yeah. And so I felt like it just added something that just felt like something that was a little bit off from the base game. And so it was the same sort of thing for me.
Because just having dudes die sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just made it a more complete game. And the other expansion that they have, the Dark Mountains, that one is more of a here is more of what you have, whereas this one is it's something new.
Okay.
So
cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, that brings us down to the number ones and number twos, which for me are essentially indistinguishable.
Besides the number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you should probably start with your two, because my number one and number two are different. I'm pretty sure Jeff's are too. So
I just put the same one down for number one and number two.
I say that they're nearly indistinguishable in that either one could go in either spot. Like my number two could easily be my number one could be my number two.
Well, you have to make a choice now.
I've already made my choice,
Okay, then
and I'm building up to this.
Okay.
If
you say a tie, I'm going to slap you in the face.
I'm not going to say a tie. My number two is Agricola, Farmers of the Moor. And when I come to my number one, I will explain why they went 1 and 2, but I'm not going to spoil my number one just yet. Farmers on the Moor is an excellent example of adding more of the same in a good way. Like, not just needlessly expanding for expansion's sake, but actually adding something new that feels like it should, like, it feels like it could have been there all along. And, you know, like, Agricola is an excellent game if you never play with Farmers of the Moor. Like, you'll never... Agricola's damn near perfect, in my opinion. However, I think Farmers of the Moor makes it more perfecter. The addition of the peep spaces that go on your farm, the additional like clearing mechanics, I think are interesting and add some depth to the game. I like that they also add, especially clearing like wooded areas, adds like another way to get wood, because that was always one of my frustrations in Agricola, is it always seemed like I would be about to take wood and the person before me would take it, and then I wouldn't get any, and then I'd be sad, and then I'd lose. I think heating adds another interesting twist as to things you have to provide each round with the feeding, and like, so you have to get food and heat because, hey, it's, you know, ancient medieval times and food and heat are hard to come by when you're a poor farmer. Yeah, it fits thematically, and there is, like, you don't need it, but once you have it, it feels like it should have been there all along. And I think that is exactly what every expansion should aspire to.
I've never played it.
So
Never played it.
No. Hefe.
What's Agricola?
That is Agricola Farmers on the Moor.
I know. I was just saying, like, Agricola, what's that? I've never played it.
Oh.
My number two is Battlestar Galactica Pegasus expansion. Now, I know how much all of you love Battlestar Galactica, so I'm sure this is going to be everyone's number one, but it's only my number two. I haven't played Battlestar Galactica very much, but when I have, it's been with the Pegasus expansion, and I don't see how this game could be played without it anymore, solely because of the airlock that is on the Pegasus. That makes it way easier to kill Cylons. You don't have to wait until you get the gun card and then you get the right votes and then you get to shoot someone. You can just put someone in the airlock and then shoot them out the airlock, which the base game just doesn't have, which was... When Ant was telling me, I was like, what? How do you not just shoot someone out an airlock? Does the Battlestar Galactica not have an airlock that you can just put people in? It has a bunch of other cool stuff where like damage control, more like shooty areas, engine rooms, and then it added a bunch of fancy new cards into the main deck as well, which is always nice. And some new rules like the Cylon Leader, which is new like treachery cards. Downside is I don't think anyone will be able to buy this game ever again, because I think Fantasy Flight's like, bye, Battlestar Galactica, see you never again, or see you in, our Android universe.
Yeah. Which, I mean, yeah, if we're going to go like, I mean, that's the same thing for Farmers on the Moor that I just talked about. Like, it's super out of print, and good luck.
So yeah, Battlestar Galactica Pegasus expansion, almost solely because of the airlock.
Right.
It's a threat that you really just, like, you could be like, I'm a Cylon. What are you gonna fucking do about it? Put me in a prison? Meh.
Now you're like, no, I'm gonna put you in.
I'm gonna put you in this prison of an airlock for, I don't know, as long as it takes me to hit the button that says close and then hit the button that says open on the other side.
I think I've only played Battlestar Galactica the one time, and it was definitely not an ideal situation. I don't remember hating it or having any like super major problems with it. This was also like probably 3 years ago. So my gaming tastes have changed drastically in that time. But I know that we did play with Pegasus, and yeah, I couldn't imagine not having the option to eject someone into space.
Yeah. There's a bunch of new characters and the plastic base stars, and
Right, yeah.
because I think they were just like cardboard chits before.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is correct. Whereas the other ships were the little minis, so a lot
Right,
of people
yeah.
are like,
Why the base stars
Yeah.
cardboard?
Right on. Zach, what is your number 2?
So my number 2 is for Eldritch Horror, and it is the Forsaken Lore expansion. So Eldritch Horror, the base game, is a great game, except for the fact that each of the major city cards, there's only 8 for each color. And so I'd heard people, this is before I bought it, I'd heard people that had seen the same cards in the first game that they played. Because if you go to that city a lot, like even with 4 people, if 8 people go there at any point, or at 8 you have 8 locations there, that those cards get shoveled back in, and you could have that same exact encounter that you just had. So this expansion added, it's a small box one, but it added 16 cards of each color to basically to make it 24. And it also it added more cards for the different bosses, or for the great old ones, the different encounters that you had, or not the encounters,
Mythos?
Mythos, no. I mean, it did add more to those. The goals, the objectives. Because before it was, you had to complete 3 of them and it came with 4, so there's a good chance, like, you'd only have 1 different. Now it added at least 2 more to those, so it was 6. So you had more variety. Basically, this just added more variety that the game really should have came with.
Right.
And this is like one of the few instances where I feel like this was one that just sort of fixed the game just by adding more, because it just needed more variety to be able to thrive as well as it does. So,
Okay.
And it also added one more boss, which was cool, and then the poison mechanic, which I really like.
Unless you're getting poisoned all the time.
Yeah, then it sucks. But
Or it's like, hey, fight this dragon first thing.
Yeah.
Also, this mythos made all your items go away.
Yeah. And now you're trapped in space and time, but that's a different one.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, this brings us to the final round of number 1s. And
First and final, some would say.
yes,
Yes.
I guess some might.
Mm-hmm.
So my number 1, and I mentioned that I was going to address why it went number 1 versus Farmers of the Moor going number 2, which I will do. So my number 1 is Concordia Salsa, which conveniently enough I played for the first time yesterday.
Straight to number 1.
I
Favorite
know.
expansion of all time.
I know that seems.
Best expansion ever, says
I know
Adrian.
that seems rash.
I played yesterday.
Yeah.
So first of all, so it's the same.
Etched in stone.
Let me explain myself.
In skywriting.
Yes.
Etched in stone.
100 people dead from stone falling from the sky.
I know that seems
Drastic.
maybe a little drastic. To put this as my number one. However, I mean, it's the same reason that like I can look at Ancetera for roads and boats and know that it is going to be on this list. Like, it will make my top 5 expansions, assuming I like roads and boats, which everything tells me I should love roads and boats. So I fully anticipate it being on this list in the future. I've known about Salsa for a long time, basically as long as I've known about Concordia. And I really, really enjoy Concordia. It would easily be, probably not quite in my top 10 because there's a lot of other great games that make my top 10. But Concordia is still one of my favorite games. It is a game I can't really ever imagine turning down. I love that game. And Salsa does the exact same thing that I love Farmers on the Moor doing to Agricola. Like, this is an expansion that Concordia is just fine without Salsa, but once you play with Salsa, it's like, this might as well have been here the whole time. The reason I put it number 1 above Farmers on the Moor is I think that Agricola is a better game by itself than Concordia is so Salsa like improves Concordia more than Farmers on the Moor improves Agricola. And I think that's part of like measuring what I think the best expansions are, is like how much they actually really improve the base game. And like going back through this entire list, every one of those games, I think I think of all 5 of the expansions I've listed, Salsa is the one that does the best job of improving a game that didn't necessarily need improving, which I think is a very tough thing for an expansion to do. Like, it's easy to fix something that's broken, but when something's already really good, to make it even better seamlessly is very hard to do. And I think Salsa does that fantastically, which is why I put it on my number 1, even after only one time playing it with the base game.
Who knew salt would add so much to the game?
Yeah. So that's my number 1.
Does it just add salt and maps?
No. Okay, so yeah, I guess I should do a better job of talking about what the expansions that I'm covering actually do instead of why they're the best expansions.
Uh-huh.
So Salsa adds a few things. It adds salt, which Jeff just mentioned. And so basically you end up with there ends up being the potential for some new salt regions to come out on the map. Which salt is a wild resource, essentially. It can, at any time, you can exchange it for any other resource. So it gives you a lot more versatility if you control salt cities. But at the same time, it is never the most valuable resource in a region. So like the little produce section of the board where you get a bonus production, it's always the most valuable resource. Well, the bonus production is never salt. Otherwise, it'd just be salt everywhere, pretty much. That alone is fantastic, and you can play it with just adding salt. It does include some expansion maps that I haven't played on because I've only played it the one time, and we played on the base map so that I could fairly compare it to base Concordia. That was the entire intention of that playthrough. So I can't speak to the expansion maps. The other thing it adds are forum tiles, which we also played with. And essentially what forum tiles are is you have a spread of 4 of them that are available. And when you play the card that lets you pick all your discards back up, if you've played 4 cards, including that card, you can take the first tile. If you played 6, you could take the second, 8, the third, 10, the fourth. And then they just shift down. And they are a mixture of like one-time use stuff. Like one of the ones I got was one time, build a city on a brick anywhere, even if it's not connected to your network. Or Megan got one that was like one time get 2 money for every region that you have a city in. So like some of those one-time uses are pretty powerful. There are also some permanent upgrades. And you start the game, if you play with those, everybody starts the game with 1 permanent upgrade. And like, so my permanent upgrade was that I can use other people's settlers to build on my turn. So like, if they're a little bit further along than me, they can be part of my chain to build. Megan had one where anytime she traded goods, she got an extra money above their normal trade value. Paul's was super powerful. His was that he could, when he used the, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the card, basically the one that lets you copy somebody else's power. He could not only copy mine and Megan's power, he could copy any of the powers that were in the available by row. So basically he had like at any given time 8 cards he could copy. You know, and so those add some interesting decisions, like, you know, like maybe I want to take like what happened in this one, the third one that on the initial spread of 4, that third one was really powerful. So nobody wanted to take the first 2 because it would push that one further down and make it cheaper. But at the same time, like, Megan and I knew that Paul started, so if we just all kept playing, he was going to beat us to that. So it was like, well, do I cave first and buy it and bump it down so that, like, maybe Paul doesn't get it and Megan can? Or does, like, what do we do? Not to mention they just add some different kind of flavor to the game, having some slightly asymmetrical abilities and things and different things to go for that can influence your strategy. So that is what Salsa adds.
Now we know.
My favorite expansion
Of all time.
but really I think it's my best expansion for the reasons that I think that I mentioned of why I chose it as the best expansion, not necessarily my favorite.
If I wasn't a fan of Concordia, do you
No.
think this wouldn't change it?
Nope.
Okay.
Same reason that I would not say Farmers on the Moor would change your opinion of
Okay.
Agricola. These are both excellent examples of taking a game that was, well, in my opinion, great, but taking a game like I already love this game and then adding more of what I love in a seamless way to where, like, I can't imagine personally ever playing either of these 2 games without their expansions, but looking back on the base game, I don't feel like I was ever like, you know what this needs? An expansion. Like, and I think that seamless ability, that's what sets these 2 apart and I think makes them great expansions.
And good luck buying either of them.
Yep. Unfortunately, you're screwed.
Yep.
Salsa will probably see a reprint sooner than Farmers on the Moor.
Yes. I believe it's also sitting right now about $80 on Amazon.
Yep. Yarp. Which breaks my heart because I don't own either one of them. So the 2 best expansions in my experience are neither one available for me to own.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. Jeff, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is something that you people talked about in depth at the very beginning. Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition Shattered Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Shattered Empire adds 7 and 8 players. It adds more balanced strategy cards. So the 1 through 8 all got new cards.
Yep.
1 through 7 all were white. 8 was dark, like the 1st edition, because they were like, just throw that one in the garbage and replace it with this no matter what you do anyways, which is what you should do. More belligerent objective cards, so it added a little bit more combat into the game. It added the Distant Suns variant, which everyone, even in 4th edition, was like, I want Distant Suns.
Unless you're Adrian.
It adds all the random...
I'm shrugging.
It added all the random encounters that you could get on colonizing a new planet. So it wasn't just like, clearly like, and here's your new planet. If you've ever gone through the Shattered Empire rulebook, there is a ton of variants in the back of there that, like, if like, hey, I'm done with regular Twilight Imperium, let's play all these crazy variants. Of course, the 8th player, and then a ton of additional tiles to where you could make an absolutely colossal galaxy. I think a regular galaxy is, 3 rings?
Yes.
And now you can do 4 rings of, like, some immense, crazy size. All the components in there are pretty nuts, because it added another 4 races. What you said, one of your favorites. It added in Paul's favorite, the Furnace people.
Adrian's favorite.
Yeah.
No, Where Ghost of
The
Korea.
one that starts with the War Sun.
Krios are not in this one.
Oh, they're in the second one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The War Sun people.
Oh yeah.
The space
Man.
werewolf janitors.
Embers of Muat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Muat is the War Sun people. It did add the space werewolf janitors.
Clan of
Sar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Yin Brotherhood.
Which
as well.
is nobody's favorite.
No one's favorite.
Everybody's worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Wormhole Nexus was,
Yin.
of course, added in this one.
So it was Adrian's favorite tile. That's what it was.
Adrian's favorite tile,
Yeah.
the Wormhole Nexus.
It just pairs so well with the ghosts.
And then the little like artifacts and a lot of stuff that is like my favorite from all of Twilight Imperium, minus because this one didn't add the stupid ambassadors and spies that I don't like.
So it was the second one that you weren't as big a fan of.
Yeah, the second one I was not as big a fan of. It did add some good stuff. I mean, like all the more cards and races and stuff like that.
Flagships, yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of the other stuff, not my favorite.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Twilight Imperium and Shattered Empire, as someone that played a ton of the base game by itself, because I bought it when it came out,
Mm-hmm.
3rd edition, and then bought expansions as they came out and added them into the game. It's definitely my favorite expansion. It also added the bigger ground force and fighter chips, like the plus 3s,
right,
plus 5s.
Oh, yeah,
Because-
those are hugely important.
Because before it was just the singles, and yeah, it's nice to have that little boost in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so much in here, like racial text. I mean, I could clearly keep going on and on and on about how much stuff that this added into the game that were all just super beneficial. That, yeah, definitely my favorite expansion.
Right on.
It's a good one.
Zach, bring us home. What is your number one?
So my number one, and I'm curious to see, can you guess what it is? Just curious. No? You don't care? Okay.
No, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Is
You're just
it
looking at your phone.
Oh, it's one that totally should have been on my list. It's continuing corruption from
Stockpile?
Stockpile.
Yeah, that is
Yep.
correct. 100% correct.
Yeah.
So when we were doing this one, this was immediately number one on my list, and then Forsaken Lore was immediately number two. Then I had to try and figure out all the other ones, but these were immediate locks. This one,
I before you
yes.
explain anything about this, I
Okay.
will say that and this is one because I remember thinking this that I should have put this on here, and then I got distracted working on it and focused too much on
yeah.
my games that I own and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This one would fit perfectly with why I put my 1 and 2 as 1 and 2.
Mhm.
Like, it is an excellent example of it fixes a game that didn't need fixing in such a seamless way that it's like, how was it ever not like
Yeah.
this?
I knew that it was going to be on your list, so I didn't put it in my honorable mentions.
Gotcha. Yeah. So this has a bunch of things going for it. For me, it has something that, should have just been in the base game, and that's the dice.
Yeah.
Horgas dice. Literally, this would still be in my top 5, I think, if it was literally just 6 dice in a bag. They're like, here you go. Like, hey, you're getting 5 for that. So it has something that should have just been there the entire time.
Yep.
It has just straight expansions of more investors, more unique investors of, it's cool. And I guess I'm sort of including the Kickstarter exclusive ones, but that's just 2. That's the Mitt Romney and Bernie Sanders one, I think. But all of them are, I love all of them. And they added new regular ones, but also ones that play with the new things in this. But it also added bonds, which gives you it gives you a more reliable output,
lower income.
lower income money, but just to be like, you always are getting these forever. And then it also added something new, which is the commodities and taxes, which is another set collection sort of thing, but it also has like a bad set collection too. And I like that you can customize this for the people you're playing with. It like if you're introducing new people to game and they are new to gamers or new to gaming in general, you'd be like, okay, well, we'll have the new investors in there that don't use the bonds or the commodities, and we'll have the dice in there. Or if you have people that are like regular gamers and stuff, it's like, we're gonna get a little deeper and stuff. Then we'll add the bonds and we'll add everything, and then it's a much deeper game. And so it makes the game just that much more versatile and essential.
Yep. No, and it's a fantastic one we talked about a little bit earlier, one that adds multiple things that can be, like you just said, added individually or separately. Like, yeah, this one actually, like I'm kind of kicking myself now. It should have pushed Zombicide right off. This should have been my number 3 and just shift everything down one spot. For the exact same reason that the other ones are up there. It's a fantastic expansion that makes an already good game even better, just seamlessly.
Yep.
And it's actually available.
Yes.
Yeah, it is available.
And reasonably priced.
Yeah. I almost wanted to ask you, Jeff, is like, so how much does your expansion cost?
It's probably far less than it used to be before Twilight Imperium 4th Edition came out. But
yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's funny watching the price of Twilight Imperium 3rd just plummet. But anyhow.
Yeah. So that's my number 1. It's my favorite expansion.
Yeah.
And
excellent choice.
And it shot Stockpile from like 7. Like it's a good game. But with that expansion, it just shot it straight up.
Yeah. No, excellent one to finish out.
Yep.
Good job, Zach.
And I want to say the expansion is even more highly rated than the base game on BGG.
Yep.
Yeah. And in some ways, like, I think that expansion is even more mandatory than either Farmers of the Moor or Salsa. Like you said, just those dice alone, man, they should have been there all along. Like, you don't notice it if you're just playing the game and you don't know anything about the expansion, but the second you play with those dice, you're like, wait, what? How did I ever play this game before?
Yeah.
So, no, fantastic way to wrap that up.
And there was something we never really played. Was it bonds or the commodities and taxes?
I've never played with commodities and taxes.
Commodities and taxes, it adds extra things, like commodities are extra things you're trying to collect. The more of these you collect, you get more money at the end. But it also taxes. The more taxes you have, and it ratchets
it up.
Yes.
Yeah. Close enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real good expansion.
Yes.
I think we could all agree on that one being a fantastic.
Yep.
If we can't agree about anything else,
Yep.
Stockpile, Continuing Corruption.
Yeah. If we can't agree on the only thing we can
Mile
agree
High
on
Game, guys.
is that Zach's right.
God damn it.
Number 1 expansion.
God damn it. I quit.
I'm just going to agree with Zach.
Yeah, there we go. Bam.
I just don't want to fight about it.
Yeah. Right on. Well, that wraps up our individual top 5s. Feel free to jump over to the Board Game Geek Guild, where there is a thread up for top expansions, and let us know what your top expansion, top 5, top 10, however many you want to are. A few people have already chimed in a few thoughts about expansions over there. Zach, you want to read some of those?
Yeah, sure. So Derek says, I feel like I'm obligated to respond since you've recognized that I am now posting on all of your threads.
Correct.
Expansions I love are generally ones that add more of the same versus fundamental game changes. So for me, I like expansions I own... I like expansions for... I own literally every card in Agricola First Edition, so something like 1,200 cards.
Jesus.
Looking through, like, when I was making this list,
the promos.
like, there is
Yeah.
so much for... There's so much more for Agricola than I ever realized.
Right. But he likes expansions for Heroes of Normandy, Descent 2.0, Keyflower, Orleans, Small World, X-Wing, etc.
X-Wing.
Before you continue that sentence,
Uh-huh.
I totally forgot to put Keyflower on that, like, honorable mention list. I've only ever played base Keyflower, but I've done enough research on the expansions that, yes, it's just a matter of time until I play them, and they'll rapidly jump on this list.
However, modular expansions that do change the base game are often welcome if they do it right and actually fix things. For example, Tuscany's Essential Edition is basically necessary to play Viticulture because of how much it expands and adds to the game. Certain parts of the Battlestar Galactica expansions are needed to help the base game as well.
Damn right they are.
And obviously, a trash can is required for Terraforming Mars because it's garbage.
Boo.
And he thinks that because he's a garbage person.
Clearly.
Just kidding. I just wanted to see if you'd shit on Terraforming Mars on the show.
No, we shit on you.
Yes. I know a lot of people crap on expansions as a pay-to-play or DLC type of approach to tabletop gaming, and I disagree completely. If a base game is trash and you have to buy an expansion to play it, then don't play the game. I don't think publishers have enough pull in the industry to put out games that are broken, and you mostly see broken games coming from Kickstarter campaigns made by first-time designers. Expansions can help revive a game. If you like the base game experience, you don't have to buy the expansion, but if you think the base game is getting stale, try out an expansion, which I definitely would agree with. There's a lot of people like, play this game for a while, then get extra expansions like Eldritch Horror. It has a whole bunch of expansions, and I think that's what people are supposed to do instead of just be like, oh, a new one's out, buy. A new one's out, buy. Like there are like 3 of them I haven't even played with, but it's still like I just need more stuff.
And same thing for like some of those ones we mentioned earlier when we were just talking expansions in general, like for games like, Carcassonne or Catan, or like they're not meant to be like oh, you're new to Catan? Here, buy all these expansions and learn the game with all the expansions. It's like, all right, you've played base Catan like 40 times, you know the game in and out. You want a little bit more to add? Here's this. Now that you have everything else down.
Yeah.
So.
And before you say this next sentence in the next one, I was thinking on his like, if you think the base game is getting stale, try out an expansion. Now continue reading.
The next post.
Yeah. This is from Aaron. Merry Men is now an essential expansion for Sheriff of Nottingham. I won't play without it.
I was literally, before I scrolled down and started reading the next post, I was like, stale things. Sheriff of Nottingham is getting stale. I heard that Merry Men thing was good.
Man,
we should try and play that.
I wanted to pick that up at Gen Con so bad. I just didn't have the money.
So who's got it now? Zach's got it.
I have it.
Yeah,
okay.
we definitely need to try it.
Yes.
I'm glad you raised your hand for all the listeners.
Yeah. If you plan on playing Dixit more than twice, you really want to add some expansions. Otherwise, it'll get old fast.
I forgot about that one. Yep.
It's very true. A lot of those styles.
And there's a ton of Dixit expansions.
Yeah. Yep. I've had my eye on the expansion for Camel Up for a while now, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. I keep meaning to play that game. Somebody has it at game.
I've seen it brought at game night last couple weeks.
And I've heard it's great, but I just haven't tried.
Yeah, I've never played it either.
Thanks, AA Ron.
You done fucked up, Aaron. Eric says, here are some expansions I think are close to necessary for the respective games. King of Tokyo Power Up Edition, or Power Up, makes the monsters unique and adds a bit more to the game. Totally agree.
Right on your list.
Marvel Legendary Dark City makes the enemies more challenging and adds some needed variety.
Does that make a legendary game good?
Oh my god.
I mean, if it makes it more challenging, then maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Lords of Waterdeep, Scoundrels of Skullport adds more worker placement options and some stress about whether to use corruption.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but I've heard it's. Everybody always says it's one of the mandatories.
Ticket to Ride 1910 adds more routes and bigger cards.
Yep.
So just like
Congratulations, Eric, on picking 2 of the 15 on your list there.
I don't think expandalones really count as expansions. They are more like variants of the originals, as they are or instead of an addition.
So that's where it depends. Like, that's why I didn't mention Dead of Winter Long Night anywhere in this, because like I was never like, oh, let me add all of Long Nights into regular Dead of Winter. Like, it's always been a separate game. So it really feels more like a, standalone sequel versus like I mentioned Zombicide, because those just get mixed in and become part of the game.
Right, yeah.
So, but I agree with him there, depending on like whether you use the expand alone as like actually the alone portion of that, or whether you bring it in as a
right, yeah. Next is from Brandon. I really dig the Wizard's Tower expansion to Castle Panic. The addition of the whole second deck of mage spells along with new monsters with new mechanics really adds to that game. Have either of you played that game before?
Negative.
I've played Castle Panic. I have not played Wizard's Tower.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to take your word for it, Brandon.
Believe you.
Also, Clank Sunken Treasures has completely replaced the base board of Clank for me in both solo and multiplayer games. Again, not a huge game changer for Clank, it only added 1 or 2 things, but it was enough of a change in scenery to boost my enjoyment of that game just a little bit more.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I don't really care for Clank.
I don't think
But
I've played
I
Sunken
do think
Treasures.
Sunken Treasures makes Clank better.
Yeah.
Same thing. It adds just enough difference that it's like, okay, yeah, I'd rather do this than go back to the original.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. It was, but I actually thought about this. I'm like, I like it, but I feel like it just adds just a little bit more, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
That I was like, so I was like, it just rated solidly as enjoyable for me, but I do like it. And then finally, Bryant says, for me, my highest rated expansions are Seven Wonders Leaders. It allows you to focus your strategy or provide you with some direction if you wish it.
I haven't played with any of the Seven Wonders expansions, but as I was researching like best expansions and stuff, like leaders and cities kept coming up over and over on a lot of like most popular stuff.
Yeah. Pantheon is another one that's like really highly rated for Seven Wonders.
Babel as well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was like a big one. That was like a more of a game changer than the other ones, right?
Which, I mean, it's another one. It kind of like there's been a lot of Seven Wonders ones. It falls into that whole like, this is a very accessible game that a lot of people have played. So here's a bunch of expansions.
Right, yep. Next up is Suburbia Inc. Very easy to incorporate into the base game, even for the first play. Makes the theme even stronger and adds more variety. The borders are great. Additional building tiles are clever.
So I really like Suburbia. I've never played Inc. Do you own Inc?
I
Zach?
do, yes.
We should play sometime and give it a shot.
Yeah, it adds, the borders are pretty cool,
Plus, I just like Suburbia and would not mind playing it more. So,
yeah.
Once you can figure out how to score things.
What?
Scoring is hard at the end of that game.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah. It sucks.
You suck.
Yeah.
Next up, Russian railroads, German railroads. As much as
Wait, German railroads aren't Russian.
German railroads.
Continue. Don't look at me like that.
No,
Zach.
I just want to let everybody sit in this moment. Just absorb it. Think in your mind, was that really worth it? Are we all worse people now that Adrian has said that? All right.
Can this episode be titled Adrian Makes a Bad Pun?
He's going to be the one editing it, unfortunately.
Fortunately, it's the review episode, so it's just...
Yeah. As much as I enjoy the base game, it can get repetitive as there are established strategies. However, this adds more variety in your strategic options. You can really customize the tracks You can really customize the tracks to do what you need at the time. The coal module changes things even further. Also, a game I've never played, so I have no...
Yeah,
I've seen the cool box.
It's all about railroads, Adrian.
I know. And I've not ventured down that particular track.
And finally, Sulkin, the Mind Calendar, Tribes and Prophecies. It adds a nice asymmetrical aspect. Everyone gets to be a specific tribe with a specific ability. It also includes the prophecies that provides short-term goals. Additionally, it gives you ways to earn points along with some penalties. A nice bit of randomness to increase replayability.
So Sulkin is one that like I'd wanted to play for a long time. And I still do want to play. It's also the only board game that really makes me regret losing my job when I did, because I worked in a fucking gear shop and I really wanted to make some awesome custom gears for that game that I could give out as like special things.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, that ain't happening now. So, oh well. But I still do really want to play it. I've heard good things. I didn't know that one had an expansion, to be honest.
Yes, it came out, I want to say a year or two ago.
Cool. Right on. Well, I think that brings everything down here kind of to a close. If you would like to participate in these Board Game Geek threads, go over to our guild number 2731, and join it. And that way you'll get notifications when Zach makes these posts. Most of them start better than as I am still recovering from a big hangover from a party last night. But at least, like you said, you own it.
Yeah. If I'm just like, I can't fucking do this, I will say, I can't fucking do this, guys.
You can also email us.
Emails at milehighgameguys.com.
And we are all on Twitter. I tweet under at MHGameGuys.
I am Zach_MHGG.
And I'm Jeff_MHGG. And clearly, if you need any video game tips, that's where you reach me.
Yep.
At.
Yes.
Yep.
We have a Slack channel that you can join by jumping over to the show notes at milehighgameguys.com and click the link and join the Slack channel. It is free and open to everyone.
And it's fixed now.
It is
That
fixed.
Zach
Yes.
doesn't keep copying the bad link.
Correct. If you want to support the show, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/milehighgameguys. And finally, you can always follow us on Facebook or Instagram /milehighgameguys. That is all of the contact and social media information.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get a Google phone number, so people can call and leave us voice messages we can play on the show.
Yeah.
That's the next step.
Papa Booey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Howard Sturtz-Peters.
God damn it. Be sure to tune in next week where we will be reviewing Argent the Consortium. And yeah,
That is a board game.
that is a board game.
First edition.
First edition. Second edition recently completed a Kickstarter few months ago and should hopefully be getting to backers, I don't know, sometime in the next few months, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we'll review it, tell you what we think. And Zach will have a thread up hopefully sometime later this week. Or maybe
It'll be
later
on Friday.
today because you're listening to this on Friday.
Exactly.
Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you've enjoyed this discussion about expansions and what our favorite ones are. As always, I've been your host, Adrian.
I am still Zach.
And I am Expanded Jeff.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I just had to contradict you. The chances are so few and far between. I have to take them when I can get them, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good job counter-dicking me, whatever word it is you said. That wasn't
Contradicting
You did
me?
not say contradict.
Counterdict.
You said
like-
counterdicts.
It's a combination.
Yeah.
It's a combination of countering you and contradicting you. And
I have been counterdict.
He's going to counterdict the shit out of you.
oh wow, the English language is fun.
English language is fun.
Yes.
But yeah, so this episode we are going to be yeah. Wow, that's real bad.
Start it all over.
Yep. I was trying to do other things. We're not starting all the way over.
No,
Damn it.
we missed everything. We can't. Pure 70s gold.
Yeah.
They were stealing from the Egyptians.
Yeah.
So there was where all the gold was.
No, I was just pure 70s gold is like totally an album best of.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Disco Inferno.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Hits of the 70s.
Pure gold hits. Hits of the 70s, pure gold hits from the 70s.
Nice.
Yeah. Told you. I'm just saying. I was like,
Just like this episode. Pure gold.
yeah.
gold, Jerry. Gold.
Gold.
Hopefully it is because all of that is going at the end. So hopefully it's played out appropriately.
Punchboard Media, where we all
Bring something
to the table.
pull up a chair
At punchboardmedia.com.